Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Blindspot as well as the latest episode of the Blacklist. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Blindspot, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of the Blacklist. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Blindspot. A lot of interesting things. So first and foremost, obviously Jane is still dealing with the whole Gibbs situation last episode. Obviously this whole Remy situation is spiraling more and more, and she's literally having an identity crisis, which is interesting because she goes to a therapist who suggests her to go to another therapist, but then she has to explain everything to her therapist. It's like, wait, who's Alice? And your glowing tattoos, what is that a metaphor for? It's like, no, it's not a metaphor. My tattoos literally glow. And it's just like, she has to literally explain this. Like, it's too much. I love that too, because it's almost, you can almost make a joke that it's the show making a joke about how crazy the plot is. And just like, oh yeah, Jane's life, when you actually break it down and actually sit there and think about everything that's happened to her, it's like, yeah, that's kind of crazy and weird. And it's not something everyone's equipped to handle. And so, she turns to the one person who would understand her. I was like, no, they're not doing that. And they totally are. She goes to see Borden. Did not see that coming. I know Patterson appreciated, them telling her ahead of time. Because it's like, if she had found, let's not forget, because Tasha was sitting on that lie the entire time, that compromised their friendship and stuff like that. So it's like, no, we're going to be straight up. But even Patterson's like, didn't expect that. But at the very least, I don't care. As long as Jane gets better, that's all that matters. But it's interesting to see her and Borden kind of sit down and talk. Because, obviously, Jane talks about everything that went down. And I love that conversation. Because for Borden, it's like, why are you treating Remy like she's a different person? Because Jane's like, but because she is. We're different people. That Zip gave me a clean slate. And he's like, no, it didn't. I'm the one that came out with that lie, because the fact is, if you were bound by all the stuff, finding out all the stuff that you were guilty of doing, the fact of the matter is, if you were kind of dealing with all of that, then, the FBI, would have treated you like a criminal too. So basically, he had to have her treat herself be treated like a victim, and actually look at herself like a victim to kind of make it more believable. And, and it's kind of interesting. You don't even think about it, but basically for Jane, that kind of set her in the mode that she's in, because she's looking at herself like, whoever I was, I got this clean slate, I can do good and stuff. That was always something that kept her going, because it kept her being like, I'm not Remy anymore. Because for her, it's also finding out the terrible stuff Remy did, plus on top of hey, she lied to Kurt and literally almost tried to kill him. So there's that complicated thing. But the whole thing of it's all a defense mechanism essentially, because it's you and Remy are literally the same person. It's not like there's that much of a distinction. Yes, you no longer have your memories, but it's not like you became a different person. You're the same person in the sense that basically your mind, you trying to escape all the stuff that you did, because you're trying to compartmentalize it, being like, no, all that terrible stuff that was done, that was Remy. I'm a new person. It's like, no, you're the same person. When I look at you, that look in your eyes is the same look I saw from Remy when we first met. So you're not different people. Your brain is just you're trying to compartmentalize it, so you can no, you're trying to almost absolve yourself of all that guilt. And basically her brain, she's having a breakdown, because it's a schism is what he called it, because basically she doesn't know how to process all of it, because she's trying to keep herself as two separate people, trying to deal with what one side of herself did. But it's no, not saying that Jane isn't a real person, that Remy isn't a real person, but it's you're all the same thing. That was kind of a bit part was Jane and Remy coming together, and the whole Alice situation, dude, that's all of who you are. You're not three separate people. You are the same person, just at different points of your lives, experiences led to down different paths. But it was so interesting, because he's the fact of the matter is, and Jane actually broke down and cried and apologized, because she realizes everything I did, I put you in this position. I recruited you because my enemies came and found me, and they killed your wife, ended up dying because of it. And she's like, the fact is, I'm so sorry, because I got you joining my mission with Shepard and everything, thinking it would help, but all I did was hurt you more, and I'm so sorry. And he's like, see, doesn't it feel good to talk about yourself and just one point of view like that, just as one person? And it is so interesting. You would not have expected that Borden out of anyone would help her. I guess for him, it's after everything that's going down, of course, he doesn't see things the Sandstorm way. But I think it's also because Another aspect you have to think about this too is I think at one point in time he did consider Remy / Jane a friend. So I think that adds that element of why he's even more willing to help. I am curious to see will this manifest into anything else in a sense of like, oh, Borden might pop up later on. Maybe she'll go visit him from time to time to get therapy. Maybe that's going to help reduce his sentencing. I doubt we'll ever see the Patterson to him situation. Granted, he might be in a situation, well, because Patterson made it clear the last time he showed up in the series to be like, oh no, like, you know, I'm never going to see him, you know, not give him that attention. So it's going to be interesting to see if anything will change because of that. Well, Patterson, inside of her head and everything, obviously, she had to kind of dig that all back up when she found out that he was alive, because she had that whole episode where she was, like, unconscious in a coma, that whole dream sequence situation. So there's that, but, you know, she was dealing with it then. She kind of moved on, but then obviously had to deal with it again. So I am curious what she's going to do about all this. But it's so interesting to think for Jane, it's like, obviously, it's not going to be an easy thing, but she does have to keep at it. Like, that's the only way she's going to make the situation better. It's like, basically, she's got to make herself essentially whole again to a certain extent. Kind of like, has to give up the thought that Remy's a different person. Kind of has to take responsibility for everything that she's done. And I love that, you know, the whole starfish story that he tells her, because she told him, basically, the boy with the 1,000 starfish on the beach that were all dying, and he saves one. It's like, you can't save all of them. Yeah, but I can save that one. At the very least, don't focus on the entire beach, that being all the bad stuff she's done. Because it's so interesting for him. It's like, no matter where you were at any stage of your life, whether you were Remy, whether you were Jane, the fact of the matter is you always search for justice. Obviously, Remy had a very like warped sense of justice, but no matter what, you always had that sense of justice. Jane's sense of justice is trying to correct the mistakes of everything that came about because of her, because Remy is what started Sandstorm and all of this, so she's trying to make up for the mistakes. And it's so interesting because I brought that up last episode of like, oh man, what if we see her trying to, you know, fix more stuff like this, fix more things like the Gibbs situation. And for her, it's like, that's kind of what this is. That's what solving these tattoos are all about too. And so it becomes a situation of like, right, like I said, not focusing on the entire beach, focus on one starfish at a time, you know. Do what you can do and slowly piece everything together from there. So I thought that was kind of a pretty nice element to it. Another side of this is the whole situation. Well, for one, there's the whole Boston and Rich situation. Boston's doing his art thing. I love that Rich is kind of like, oh, we needed to bring Boston in, you know. He's not safe out there with the assassins. I'll get to that soon enough. But then, like, Passion's like, oh, you're just doing that because your newly freed, you know, ex is out there. And he's like, no, it's not about that. The fact of the matter is, he was kind of like, would you be saying the same thing to Jane and Kurt? And she's like, what? No, that's completely different. And then it turns out, like, he's buying up all of Boston's art and stuff like that just because. And he had some justification for it later on, being like, the fact is, I want to do this to make sure that, you know, because if he's a criminal, the art world's not going to look at it the same. But if I buy up some of his art, then he gets a little buzz. And, you know, and for him, it's like, I also kind of ruined his life the moment I came into it. You know, kind of brought him into this criminal world. So I'd rather him kind of like, you know, I kind of want to make it up for him. But, like, Patterson, knowing Rich so well, is like, the moment you get in an argument, once he pushes a button of yours, you're going to throw this in his face, and he's never going to forgive you for it. So I thought that was so interesting. He came close to it if it wasn't for Reed. I'm also curious, like, Boston making that point of like, oh, you should work, you know, look into, you know, wearing a turtleneck, you know, just kind of saying you have Reed, whatever. Also, there's that side note of Patterson recording herself. Like, what's that about? Is she going to write a book or something? Because Rich is like, what's that about? She's like, oh, it's nothing. It's like, that was the only thing in the episode about that. Maybe that's going to be something we see potentially later on. I'm curious. Like she might be writing a book about everything that they're going through. I mean, Rich literally just made a game out of it, so maybe she's writing like a memoir. Or maybe it's supposed to be something a little sadder, like maybe there's something going on with Patterson. Maybe she's sick or something. Well, it seems like she was more so taking notes about everything that was going on. About, like, you know, that, I guess because it's such a little personal thing for her, she's not letting Rich get involved or whatever. So never mind, that takes that back. But still, it's like, the fact is, why would you keep that secret? Like, why is that like something you're recording on your own like that? That makes me think, like, maybe there's something more to it. Maybe she's turning it into a podcast or something like that. I doubt it. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, because I did let it slip my mind that that's what it was about. It was about the person that snuck in there and stole something from Shepard's place before the FBI showed up. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening because of that. So ignore a lot of what I had said before. So I do apologize. But I do love that in the end, like, Bastien is like, because, you know, Rich is like, hey, I want you to know I am very proud of you and all that you're doing, your work, your artwork and stuff like that. It's like, oh. And it turns out Bastien's like, oh, yeah, I knew it was you the entire time. And, well, not even saying it directly. It's like, oh, I didn't know your wall, you had so much free space in your apartment. And it's like, Patterson's like, wait. So he knows that you bought up all his art. And you know that he knows, yet neither one of you saying anything. He's like, yeah. I love us. And Patterson's just kind of like, whatever. You and Bastien's complicated relationship. Now that's one side of things. And then there's the Madeline side of things. Continuing the craziness that is Madeline. It's like, oh man, there's cartel hitmen everywhere. It's like, oh man. Well, there's one in particular. And then like hits were happening at the same time. I was starting to throw out theories because it's like, oh, were there multiple people at the same time? Because they start thinking, I was like, oh, are we dealing with like assassin twins or something? Like, oh, you caught one of the twins at one point in time, but the other's actually out there. Turns out that's not the case at all. Apparently, Madeline's just taking advantage of like, oh yeah, the cartel's sending people after us. So she basically uses an opportunity to cover up her own personal hit list. So her and Dominic have basically been killing everyone from HCI Global, anyone that knows a lot about her that could potentially be used against her. It's like, man, Madeline is bloodthirsty, cold-blooded, because even you know, Rich is like, wow, she took lemonade and turned it into, she took lemons and she turned it into her own very bloody lemonade. It's like, that's twisted. There's also that whole Helios thing. We don't know what the hell that's about. Crazy turn after turn after turn. I just like I said, I really like that twist of like she's the one killing everybody. I was like, oh, because at the same time it's like, oh, why is she leaving Tasha alive? It's like because she's trying to take advantage of it and stuff like that. But I'm like, what is her plans for Tasha? Sitting here thinking about it now, it has to deal with the CIA, because the CIA is obviously going to be coming after Tasha because they still don't have what they need to clear her name. So the CIA still might get in a way and kind of screw with their investigation to a certain extent. I mean, let's not forget there's also the White's situation. Like, he can be called in for a favor when it's all said and done. It is kind of poetic, the person who ends up arresting her, and I'm sure it felt good for Tasha, was like taking down Madeline, because Madeline was like, hey, the moment Madeline's kind of taken down, hey, she can clear her name and Keaton's name, but also, you know, finally not have to worry about this, you know, guillotine hanging over her neck. But I don't think it's quite gone yet. Like I said, the CIA is still an issue, so... But obviously, Madeline's got a lot of stuff planned in advance. Because, like I said, it seemed like she's got stuff planned for Tasha. Because it's like she could have easily had Tasha killed at the beginning. Also, I love that the lady that ended up knocking Tasha out when Tasha went to get that thing from Madeline. I do appreciate how the episode was structured. I didn't even bring that up at the beginning, but the whole, like, oh, 6 days ago, 4 days ago, now, and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's so interestingly done. How, like, we kind of get an insight to Madeline's side of things in that regard. It's like a fast cut of it, but it was still appreciated. I thought it was kind of neat. Poor lady ended up getting killed. Kind of just once again shown, it's like, oh yeah, give her this treatment. And Dominic's like, are you sure? She's like, yeah. And then he has to put her down. The fact is that she was like, Dominic, what are you? Must mean that she must have been tight with Dominic or knew him, or maybe it's just the whole thing of like, oh, I've been on your payroll, Madeline's payroll, so for so long that obviously me and Dominic have worked together, and it's just like, it's kind of sad that things kind of ended that way. It's like I said, like, I think she might be the most twisted person they've gone up against. Like, Shepard had her issues, but it's like, I feel like Madeline's in a whole other league. And I like that, because it's so interesting, because the actress who plays Madeline, I've always seen her in decently nice roles. Like, obviously in The Punisher, her character, I'm blanking on her character's name now, but, you know, she's complicated. But it's also because I think it's also because, like, one of the roles I associate with her the most is, like, Nick's mom. Which, even then, when you actually think about the entirety of Grimm, she was never actually in it that much. She was not in his life a lot. I mean, to be fair, he thought she was in. It's a whole thing. But I think that's why, and like I said, she never plays, like, an evil person. This is the first time she plays an outright evil person. Like, you can be like, her character in The Punisher, questionable at best. But still, it's just kind of interesting. And just got to give major props to that actress. For doing, like, playing that role like that, because she's just like, just when she smiles and stuff, you're like, man, you were not to be messed with. But then you have Dominic at the end kidnapping Jane. Now I'm assuming Jane is going to be their leverage to get Madeline free, and obviously this is also going to be him calling in a deal with his whites, because, you know, Dominic's the one that talked to him specifically. So, or maybe like Madeline's going to talk to White herself and be like, oh, like, we were in contact, and he finds out, like, oh, that's what this was all about. potentially. So I don't know. That's where my mind is with all of this. But why else take Jane? Like, not unless this is once again kind of playing at Tasha, getting revenge against her by hurting people. You would think it'd be, well, because Jane was the one that was by herself. Side note, that thing of like sucking up their with the MR machine by cranking up the magnet to take away their guns was pretty dope. So that's some very interesting developments. I'm very curious to see how this ultimately ends up playing out in the next episode. I'm curious what they have in store for us. Oh yeah, I'm also curious about that JB situation. I guess they arrested him afterwards. That was kind of pretty slick. I do thought it was kind of nice that Bastien was like, oh, he's obviously lying. Because even I was like, yeah, there's something fishy about the way he's so calm, cool, and collected like that. Especially consider, like, even if you were like, oh, the FBI is going to take care of her. Like, the fact is you're not nervous at all. Literally, the reason why Madeline killed the final dude, well, Dominic killed him, but for Madeline, it's like, oh, the reason why she killed Casey is like, oh, because I saw the fear in your eyes. So it's like, JB must be that freaking loyal and everything like that. I mean, I guess for him, he never planned on getting to 10 million anyway. He knew they would anyway. So it's just kind of interesting. Like I said, I'm sure that he just got straight up arrested afterwards, but he was so smug about everything too. But, you know, like I said, we'll see. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Blacklist, a great episode, literally down to the wire. We have Harold saving Reddington's life. I love it because it's a thing, and it's something Cooper brings up later on. It's like the man we hate to love, but it's like because everyone's gathered around. It's like Samar, Aram, and Wrestler, they want to be there for Liz, but it's like he's alive and everyone's celebrating. It's like, even Wrestler, that's what I'm talking about, how crazy this situation is. Because even later on, he's like, man, I always knew you kind of came from the bottom of the deck, but to literally, you know, cheat death, I'm impressed. He's like, I didn't cheat death, I cheat the president. I was like, that's so good. I didn't love the phone was ringing, and he was like, please tell me someone's going to get that. And it's so good because he lied about like, oh, I don't actually know what's going on here. I just bluffed my way to getting a 48-hour window to figure this all out. Oh, it's so good. The plot continues to thicken. Monroe and Miles, that whole situation, because the truth starts unraveling. And what's so interesting is like Reddington goes to visit that family. I love it, and they're playing that game, and Reddington shows up and stuff like that, and then Dembe joins in. That's so good. I love it. It's like he's just like, ah, and she's like thirsty. He's like, yeah, and this, and it's like he's like, Dembe, come on, and he's like, oh, thank you. Like, it's like he literally took time to do this because he's like, how do you play and stuff? I was like, oh my god, Dembe, this is so good. That's so freaking amazing. I love it, dude. That was just like, I just love how inappropriate it was because everyone else there was just scared. Even the lady was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore, playing the game. Dude, it's crazy. Because obviously, like, his name's been plastered all over the news recently, too. So they're like, Raymond Reddington, what are you doing here? So obviously, everyone's freaked out about it. You have Anna sending Monroe after Reddington, and it's so interesting. When it's all said and done, it's like Monroe doesn't actually go through pulling the trigger. I love that whole story of, like, you know, him being like making this whole thing an analogy to magic. Also, like, oh yeah, those two with the tiger. Yeah, apparently they masturbate the tiger to get it to basically, you know, where they can perform with it and stuff like that. Which I'm like, is that true? That's weird and messed up. But Monroe is kind of a nationalist, and like he thought he was doing this all for one particular reason, but he looks at the dossier and realizes like, oh, he's being manipulated, just turn after turn. Oh, it's so good. And what's so interesting is, I wonder how Anna was going to talk her way out of that. Like, when Monroe gets to her and everything, it's like, how are you going to talk your way out of that situation? That would have been interesting to find out. I also love that Monroe was like, oh, like, I'm not going to show you the dossier. Me letting you live is kind of like payment enough initially. So that was kind of interesting. I guess she would have tried to sweet talk her way out of the situation. I don't know what she would have been able to do considering the fact that he saw the dossier. But it told him that they did this, but he doesn't know why they did that, interestingly enough. So I know I didn't give Cooper the props he deserves too, like literally threatening the president, because it's like, oh, if you don't do this, I'm going to tell our German allies that you had a chance to save Ziegler's life with this whole Reddington thing, but you didn't want to listen. And it's like, yo, the ball's on Cooper, dude. Like, just the fact is, you know, it seems like Reddington's kind of rubbed off on him a little bit in this whole situation as well. Just like you know, everyone's kind of gotten influenced by Reddington in some shape or form with all, you know, everything that's kind of happened to them over the course of the series. What's also interesting is everything with Samar. Like, Samar, like, you know, Aram was kind of be like, you know, we should tell Cooper, but she, you know, for her, it's like, I got everything under control. You saw me in the field. I'm very capable and competent. So obviously, I'm still in emotions. Like, there's a little issues here and there, but it's no problem. But for her, that all changed because this was like the biggest misstep for her. It's like she, like the blinding light and just her like sensory overload or whatever. But for her, it's like she felt like I could have taken down Monroe and saved Miles. He would be alive right now if it wasn't for me. It's like he died in my arms. You make it sound like it was such a peaceful thing, or like I was there protecting him. Like, because Aram, it's like, no, this wasn't on you, this was on Monroe. But for Samar, it's like, you always do the right thing. I should have listened to you from the beginning. And so it's like, I'm going to tell Cooper. And Aram's like, okay, good. And when she does, I was like, she's not going to tell him the truth. Like, what's she going to do? She just says, I'm leaving the task force. For her, she's like, but I'm thankful for everything. Because of you, I met Aram. The fact is, I appreciate the good work that we do. And she hugs Cooper and says, thank you. I was trying to figure out in my head, I was like, why doesn't she want them to know? And I trace it back to the fact is, I was like, I was initially thinking it's because she didn't want them to worry, in particular Cooper. And it's like, it seems like it's actually built upon that. What I'm thinking is, because her condition is going to get worse. And if she tells them the truth, they are a family, they'll stick by her. So at the very least, if she's away from all of them, she can hide her condition and they won't worry about her. If Aram is under the impression like, oh, I told Cooper or something, then she doesn't have to worry about him accidentally spilling it to them, which that might be ultimately what happens. I'm curious what she's going to do about that. Is she just going to keep Aram thinking like maybe that Cooper transferred her or something to a different department? That might be like, maybe I'm curious how she's going to cover this up, because I'm sure she's going to lie to Aram too, but it's just because she doesn't want them to worry, because she's already got Aram. But also I think it's for her, it's like, I failed, you know, that was 100% on me, and because I failed like that, I don't deserve to be a part of task force. And so it's about keeping them away from finding out the truth about her, but I think it's also a way of her punishing herself for this that wasn't even her fault. Like, it was a misstep, sure, but it was all on Monroe. He was the one that did the bad stuff in the situation, not her, you know? I haven't loved him be like, oh, I didn't know you smoke. She's like, no, I don't. I quit 5 years ago. And it's like, jeez, dude, that sucks. To see things kind of progress. I mean, especially knowing that, like, things are, because for her, it's like, her condition, there's no reversing it. So all she can do is basically help kind of mitigate some of the continuous deterioration. Is all she can do. It's trying to halt that, and even then halting it, there might not be any completely stopping it. At the very least, she can make it so it doesn't spread potentially. So I don't know if it's a condition that will necessarily spread. I think it will, at the very least, the way she was kind of talking about it before, but still, it kind of sucks that things kind of played out that way. Obviously, like, this whole situation, this reach goes beyond just Anna and the president. What's interesting too is that Anna's like, oh, tell your wife, you know. It's like, oh, so what about the first lady? And he's like, that's a whole other situation, which I'm like, your wife doesn't know about this, does she? Or is she neck deep in this as well? Because the fact is the reluctancy on his face, because I think it's like he has to go to his wife and he has to continuously lie to her about everything. So that's a whole thing. I'm also skipping over, well, it kind of connects all together, because that guy who was, I guess he's part of the Secret Service, you know, because I was wondering about that, because he was having a conversation with the president, like, how much does Reddington know? The fact is, he was talking like that, it almost seemed like he was the liaison in this situation, like he's the middleman between whatever situation that they're caught up in and what this whole thing is about, because once again, we don't know. Like, I chalked it up to be like a cabal thing, like, because like I said, the cabal is kind of like this worldwide organization we haven't really dealt with in a little while, but I was thinking like this has something to do with them, maybe this strike on America is just like the beginning step. Like, why would people within the states want to do this? Like, what is their grand plan in all of this? And like I said, is that guy just a part of this situation? Because it just seems interesting that this one particular guy is in the know, because even Anna's thanking him for putting a bullet in Monroe, but it's like, beyond that, it's like, why you? Like, it had to be a situation of you have to be like a liaison, or maybe he's someone who believes in whatever it is that they're doing. Like, I mean, that's the thing. We don't know how high up this goes. I mean, this goes up pretty high, but Reddington kind of explains it later on. That like, yep, Anna's the one behind all of this, and now it's like the deal has been reenacted with his immunity agreement. And I love Cooper being like, oh, we're going to be happy to have you. She's like, yeah, I see your sarcasm. He's like, no, I mean this legitimately. The mortality rate on this position seems to be really high, which is like, yeah, let's not forget literally all the people who's taken this position before have ended up dead. So that's definitely going to be interesting. But I also love that their conditions for this, obviously, is kind of a repeat of the previous deal. Also, it looks like Vontae is getting early parole, which is like, yo, that's dope. Does that mean we're going to be seeing Vontae hang around Reddington, kind of being like, you know, another Dembe kind of helping out in situation? Or we're just going to have Vontae kind of returning to his life, popping in, helping Reddington from time to time? Is it going to be kind of like his, like, oh, you help me do small stuff, not too dangerous? Like, are we going to get a little bit more into who Vontae is a little bit more, or not at all? I'm curious to see what ends up happening. Is that just going to be the last time we get mentioned? Will we see him at all? Like, I'm curious about that. So now they're not only in a complicated situation of, well, they're kind of running back up to being a task force again. It's like, hey, the family's kind of put back together again. But also now they have to lie to Main Justice, because it's like, not only is she going to be watching their every move to kind of find out what they know, because Reddington and his bluffing, his poker face is unmatched. And because of that, in this game of chicken, they ended up blinking. The president in particular ended up blinking before Reddington did, so that's good. I love him being like, yeah, actually I'm gonna leave here because I forgot just how much it smells of stress and all that, just old coffee and body odor. And then Aram was like, is he talking about me? And Samar was just kind of like, no. He just kind of like, I got to get away from here, you know, kind of go wherever he can, or, you know, the sky's the limit, you know, the situation. So, like, enjoying his freedom. But it also brought up an interesting conversation between Wrestler and, you know, Elizabeth. The whole conversation you didn't tell him about you knowing him being the imposter. And she's like, yeah, I'm just going to let it go. The fact is, you know, for her, and she says she's okay with it. Now, we don't know. Maybe something's going to change her mind. But the way she's been acting towards Reddington now, it's like she might have let this go. But Wrestler, I don't think so. I think he's going to be the one that continues investigating this. Let's not forget the last time someone went investigating on their own, you know, that ended up with Tom, ended up dying because of all of that. Like, it's a lot of extenuating circumstances, but still, they ended up playing out like that because, you know, for Tom. So let's hope it doesn't end up like that for Wrestler. But like I said, I think for him, it's like, I think he wants to help find out this truth because, you know, for Liz, which once again, I'm like, it seemed like this might be leaning more towards potentially the whole Liz and Wrestler thing. I don't know if, like, I always kind of felt like that was going to be a thing, but it never was. It's never really even been hinted at. Like, they care about each other, but I don't know if it'll ever go down that route, considering, like, Tom is still, I think, a fairly fresh enough wound for her. What's also interesting, too, you got to think about this, too, is like, what about Jennifer? Jennifer walked away from all this, sure, but she still wanted answers as well, but she just didn't want to kind of get, you know, because what this situation would have turned her into. So what is Liz going to do about that? Like, you know, because it's not just her who wanted answers, it's also Jennifer. We might have a situation where Jennifer pops back up and she starts asking questions, and Liz is like, oh, I can't, after everything they went through, she can't be like, actually, I've changed my mind, I don't want to know. It's like, no, Jennifer wants to know because she wants to know what happened to her dad. To be fair, all that kind of came up during trial to a certain extent, like finding out like the truth about him. So maybe Liz told that to Jennifer, and maybe that's all that's enough for her. I mean, at the very least, you know, if she told Jennifer at all, she might not have talked to Jennifer because she might have been so preoccupied with trying to make sure that Reddington doesn't die, because no matter who he is someone that loves her and she loves him. So once again, it's actually kind of a surprise. Like, I thought she'd kind of stay kind of in an antagonistic role in that regard, but it's like, no, she had to change her heart because, like, you know, she was mad because of all the secrets, but now that so much has come out, because it's like, it's not just him she has to be mad at, because it's also Katerina and her mom, because that's just a whole can of worms all on its own. So that's definitely going to be interesting. And I also appreciate the fact is, because obviously, once again, they can't let people know that the deal is back in place, so it looks like Reddington escaped. I'm wondering how Seema is going to handle that. because obviously he was the one pushing towards this whole situation. I want to know how him and the judge feel. It'd be so interesting if Reddington tried to hook up with the judge now, because he was kind of doing that flirting of like, oh, when I'm free and stuff like that, we should go to a coffee. Like, we might see kind of a wink and nod or reference to that. Maybe. I don't know. Probably not. Probably because it won't do him any good, because she's a very, all about the justice system. So if she sees Reddington again, plus they know about the previous, deal that was made, but once again, it's like if the deal was made public, then Reddington loses the deal. But also another aspect I also think about this too, because obviously it's all about Liz finding out, Reddington's, identity, kind of letting that go. There's still the danger of Reddington finding out that Liz was the one that got him arrested in the first place. And after all this, that might not be the blow he needs right now, especially after getting away from prison, literally escaping the death sentence. I don't know. I don't see Dembe telling him, but I feel like there are going to be circumstances that lead to him finding out what those are exactly. We don't know. And then there's a whole situation about Monroe dropping off the flash drive. Some random person has it potentially. Neither side has it, and neither side really has a way of tracking it down. So this is a huge stalemate based on deception, because they know that Reddington knows about them potentially, because Anna's like, well, because at the very least, the president knew that Monroe went to see Reddington, and Reddington's still alive, so they know, he knows. But now, like I said, it's going to be this big game of cat and mouse, and I'm so excited to see where all of this ends up taking us. These are some very interesting developments, and I'm curious to see what ends up becoming because of all of this. That was a weird way I phrased that. I apologize. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.